So, Bandai just dropped a new ban list, and the online reaction has been interesting. People are upset that Bandai has not properly dealt with Evil Buu and Satan City, and I think it's a fair concern to have, since basically set 4, Satan City and Evil Buu have been on top of Fusion World. These decks were both insanely powerful for multiple reasons. Satan City was probably the most flexible deck in the game, being able to lean into multiple different win conditions depending on the matchup. They can play aggressively with 1-cost Videl and Final Hope Slash. They can loop Shorthair to get a gigantic hand. They can consistently clear board with cost reduction and the Great Saiyaman extra card. Bingo! And all of this was way more mana efficient thanks to Sharpener. The only requirement to make any of this happen was to flood the board with 1-cost cards, which they were in no short supply of. If you didn't have a lot of 1-cost removal, Satan City could bully you with removal and never run out of cards themselves. Without a game plan that was specifically designed to deal with their board, you probably didn't have a chance. And even if you had the tools to clear their board, it's still not going to be easy. Evil Buu was different as the deck was a bit less flexible than Satan City, but in exchange, this was an incredibly powerful aggro deck. What pushed this deck over the top was the combination of unstoppable hand control and one of the best kill turns in the game. We'll get into the details later, but all you need to know is that Evil Buu ripped your hand apart and then swung a million times to finish the job. After Worlds, it was clear that these two decks were a big problem. They made up almost 3/4 of the decks that participated, and 7 out of 8 decks that advanced to the second round were either one of these two. And yes, the finals was a Satan City mirror match. Set 6 helped a tiny bit, but mostly just confirmed that these two decks were the best, as the meta barely budged from what it looked like in Set 5. So a ban list was in order. Many thought that it was overdue. But when we finally got our ban list, the people were not satisfied. Bandai decided to ban Pilaf and limit Babidi to 1. The initial reaction that I saw was that Evil Buu only got a slap on the wrist, and Babidi didn't even hit any of the Satan City cards, instead just punishing all of blue and taking away a card that was helpful but not necessary for the deck to function. And I think that everyone is wrong, and that the ban list is good enough. But before you click off of this video, let me explain. A lot of people felt that the Buff Buu was the card that Bandai needed to hit, not Babidi. The thought was that you could easily replace Babidi by just running more cantrips, meaning that the deck is kind of just fine after this hit. And while I understand why people feel this way, I don't really think that it's true. In reality, I think Babidi was incredibly important, and it fueled Evil Buu's steam engine. Babidi has 3 important roles to play in this deck. It's a guaranteed KO for your KO effects. Both Buuhan and Buff Buu need to KO a target in order to get their effects. Babidi comes for free with these cards, letting you not really have to worry about the targets beforehand, and guaranteeing that you can get full value out of your turn as long as you have Babidi. Cantrips cost mana and can't be played on the same curve as Babidi, meaning that you need to play cantrips in advance, leaving yourself open to being board controlled by the opponent. You need the right targets for your leader. The leader effect will only trigger if Majin or Evil Wizard cards are KO'd, meaning that the current builds that just run 12 random cantrips don't work to trigger your leader effects. Obviously, you could simply run the new 1-cost Respu and the Babidi Searcher, but I really don't think that these cards are the same. Popping a 10k on your turn is definitely not the best feeling in the world, and the Babidi Searcher is genuinely mediocre, not even searching out 5-drop Buu cards or other evil wizards. Unfortunately, you'll probably need to run this card anyways, as you aren't really left with many other options. Finally, I think that this generates the right kind of advantage. Using a cantrip or a Babidi as a target for your KOs has the same net effect on advantage. Either both players just stay card neutral, or both players go -1. It's important to consider that in the context of Evil Buu, it's significantly stronger to force a -1 as you are an aggro deck. A big part of why hand control and aggro work so well together as a combination is that it's inherently better to remove options from your opponent than it is to gain options from yourself. It's a complementary duo. But don't take my word for it. I talked to regional winner and top player JTCG about the new ban list, and we had a short conversation that you can find on my channel. Ultimately, he shares a lot of my opinions on the state of the game and how these bans affected Satan City and Evil Buu, but we did have a few differences. It's still a super interesting conversation, and I think you should check it out after this video. I tested how well FBO 6 Evil Buu does into the meta without Babidi, and against basically every meta leader, my Buu tanks felt like a wet noodle, and I found myself running out of targets to KO surprisingly often, even playing as many cantrips as I possibly could. If I needed to kill on 5 mana and I ran out of cantrips, I was honestly out of luck. If Buu didn't get any support, more than likely people would just move on from the deck or keep it as a niche aggro, but this isn't the case. Buu actually did get a lot of great support in the manga booster, but this support was different from the old Buu cards. Only a couple of these focused on KOing your own battle cards, and none of them had any hand destruction. These cards are mostly centered around stun and disruption, and while they're very strong cards, and I wouldn't be surprised if Buu was able to still make top cuts, this isn't the same flavor of Buu that we've come to expect. I get that Buu in general is strong, but on the contrary, hand control Buu is pretty weak right now. The Buu of the future will be a lot less toxic towards the decks that hand control was able to make unviable. Most red decks, lots of green leaders, and some blue leaders were all heavily held back by the presence of hand control. Basically, any leader that wanted to awaken quickly was choked out of the format because they were punished for simply playing the game. With Evil Buu gone, this is no longer the case. And now that we have a much wider meta, I'd say that the game is definitely in a more healthy place. But before we can talk about the new metagame, let's talk about the other elephant in the room. I'm not going to pretend that banning Pilaf is this gigantic hit to Satan City. I don't think it's a small hit either. Pilaf allowed Satan City to become a very defensive deck and stall out games if it really wanted to, but ultimately the power level of no Pilaf Satan City is still very high, which I wouldn't say the same for Evil Buu with no Babidi. Likely a tier 1 deck, I don't think that Satan City is going away. However, is it going to completely dominate the top level game like it did before? I think the answer is no. One thing to consider here is that the field of decks that Satan City had to deal with in the past was not nearly as wide, especially during Set 5, where Worlds took place. Daima 1 and Beerus were both pretty solid into Satan City, but got choked out of the meta by Evil Buu, meaning that Satan City got stronger as a result as these decks disappeared from top tables. Other decks like Android 17 have always been able to stall Satan City, but would often get cleared out of the room by Evil Buu as well. Now Satan City needs to rely on a very solid aggro curve if they want to deal with green. There is a lot of newer cards that are able to put up a good fight too. Broly BR has been a problem for Satan City, as the constant 1-cost removal can slow them down quite significantly. Low mana green decks just got hit, which can completely shut down Satan City's momentum by clearing all of their 1-cost cards. That means decks like Namek, Green Vegeta, Giblet, and Broly all now have a reliable way to deal with Satan City's board if they manage to snowball, something that most of those decks didn't have the ability to do. The craziest new card against Satan City is actually a card given to the other blue aggro deck, World Tournament Goku. Full Power Kamehameha is a completely devastating card to use against Satan City at basically any point in the game. This not only bottom decks all of their 1-cost cards, but their Videls as well, totally halting their momentum. It also gives a battle card 25k power during that turn as an added bonus. I get that Satan City is strong, and I still think that it's going to be a contender, but I really don't think it's going to be terrorizing the new formats like it terrorized Set 5 and Set 6. To be honest, I think that a decent amount of you who have stuck with me likely still feel that Bandai has not done a great job with this ban list, and I would be inclined to agree. Despite everything that I said, I still think that banning Pilaf has left a few blue decks a bit too far behind. And they can't even give blue a nerfed once per turn alternative in the future without risking Satan City getting too strong again. I also think that some of the TOP cards really have no business being on the ban list this long. Kefla in particular is completely fine to come back to the game in my opinion, especially without Ribrianne and Roshi. TOP has been somewhat power crept. But if your main concerns for the new format were allowing new leaders to shine and adding to leader diversity, I really think that Bandai has accomplished this with the new ban list. Maybe I'll be wrong, and we'll just get another blue and yellow format again, but me and a lot of other very strong players feel that this game still has a lot to offer, and we're really excited to take a bite out of this new format. There are a ton of new decks to try out, and nobody really knows what's going to be in the next top cut. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you listening to what I have to say. If you like this, check out some of my other tournament videos. I spend a ton of time narrating my gameplay, and the tournaments are always really interesting. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.